In this video, we're going to talk about whether coaching can actually heal people, right? There's a lot of discussion about therapy versus coaching versus counseling, and there's a lot of trauma in the world today, and a lot of people are talking about trauma. So a question that we get a lot is, can coaching actually heal traumas and heal wounds and fears and all that? So that's what I'm going to break down in this video. So today we're going to talk about deep work. We're going to talk about trauma, and can coaching really heal trauma? So I want to talk about two main things here. I want to talk about function versus form, and then I want to dive into trauma. Before we even get to those two specific things, I want to give you this umbrella distinction that we make in our community, that I make personally as a trainer, between normal coaching and neurotransformational coaching. Normal coaching is what we see out there most of the time. And I am not the kind of guy that is throwing people under the bus. I'm not trying to make values judgments. I'm just trying to make a distinction, right? I can say, listen, that animal is a horse and this animal is a zebra. Just making a distinction. And if you want a zebra, don't buy a horse. And if you want a horse, don't buy a zebra. And don't feed a horse zebra food, right? So I'm just making a distinction, not a values judgment. Most coaching that's available to us, and most coaching in the way that we think about it, is really just a certain kind of motivational instruction. We're going to tell you what to do and motivate you to do it, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Neurotransformational coaching is just much, much deeper than that. Neurotransformation means you can make a transformation in your neurology, which means you can feel things that you didn't used to feel, or not feel things anymore that you used to feel. Meaning that you used to feel scared when you thought about relationships, or you thought about getting up on stage and talking to people, or you got into sales conversations. You used to feel fear. You used to feel the anxiety. And through a neurotransformation, you don't feel that anymore. Or you used to not feel true happiness or true gratitude, fulfillment. And through a neurotransformation, you now do feel that. We can actually make shifts in our neurology, in our embodied experience on this planet. That's neurotransformational coaching. And if you want a different analogy that I think will really fit, we talk about the distinction between snorkeling and scuba diving. They both involve going in the water, but with snorkeling gear, you can only go so deep. With scuba gear, you can go all the way down. Now, you can be a scuba diver and still stay at the surface. So you can have neurotransformational skills as a coach, but still snorkel. You can still stay up here for whatever reason. Doesn't matter why. That's just the role that you want to play. That's the lane you want to stay in. You don't feel comfortable going down way deep in the water. That's totally fine. But I want you to understand that there are levels to coaching that can go all the way deep into a transformation. And that's what neurotransformation is. That's what we teach here. That's what I teach. That's what our company has actually trademarked, is neurotransformational coaching. And that's the experience that, number one, you feel for yourself when you go through the training, right? If you're going to scuba dive, you got to get wet. You got to go through the depths of the water so that you can really take somebody else with you. So what's so beautiful about this kind of coaching is the personal transformations that you can have during the process, that you must have actually during the process. So neurotransformational coaching can absolutely handle whatever is below the surface of the human. Normal snorkeling coaching cannot. Normal snorkeling coaching can just try to motivate the human to do the things that the human might not have the capacity to do. And if that's the case, then you as a coach or you as a leader, your results and your influence is capped at the capacity of your clients. Meaning, if I tell you to manipulate your behavior this way, and I try to motivate you to do it, but you've got something underneath the surface that's causing you to not be able to do that, or not be able to stay committed to that, or you've got some kind of emotional hook inside of you, you've got the parking brake on, and you don't know how to undo that, and I don't know how to undo that, then the best I can do as your coach is try to motivate you against your internal resistance. And here's one thing I know. If you're driving a boat and your anchor is at the bottom of the seafloor and it is hooked into the floor of the sea, it doesn't matter how hard you rev your boat. It doesn't matter how good of a driver you are or I am. If that anchor is inside the earth, your boat can only spin in this tethered circle that's connected to the anchor. And I might actually be the best boat driving mentor and coach in the entire world. I can't get you out of your circle because you have an anchor. That's the difference between normal coaching and neurotransformational coaching, where we can actually remove the anchors that are keeping us stuck as humans. Now, with neurotransformational coaching, there's a lot of ingredients in this recipe. You know, I studied NLP. NLP changed my life 16 years ago on a piano bench in a crowded hotel lobby, changed my life in 15 minutes. And I got up off that bench and I walked back into the room that I had just left. And I just had this experience that I had never had before. I felt lighter than I ever felt before. It was like the colors in the world got more vibrant. I came home and my wife asked what happened to me, and I saw everything different and I felt everything different. And I just said, everybody's got to feel this. Everybody has to feel this. And so then I dove into this idea of and the study of NLP. And over the course of the last 15 years, I've pulled a little bit from here and from there and different coaching methodologies. And a lot of the stuff that I pulled from is from psychotherapy, which is kind of like the grandfather of the deep coaching work of therapy and counseling and some of the deep stuff, right? And then a lot of it is just my personal experience, testing things out and trying this and making up exercises here, and just all the experience of what can help the human transform. And so that body of work is what I call and what we teach neurotransformational coaching. And it involves understanding the neurology of humans. It involves understanding the brain, understanding the body, understanding the heart, understanding the connection, understanding everything that we can possibly understand and studying it. It's like being a mechanic. If you study the engine of a car so much so that you understand how the whole thing works, it'll take a while. It'll take some practice. But if you really truly understood how the engine works, anybody could bring their car to you, and all you have to understand is what's going on. Where are you hearing the sounds? When you turn the key, you know, back when we had keys, or some of us still do have the keys, right? When you turn the key, what sound does it make? What messages are showing up on the dashboard? How does the car move? If you can tell me what's happening and I know the machine, if I know the engine, then I can fix anything because I understand how the engine works. So what if as a coach, you understood how the human engine worked? Then really does it matter which hose has a leak in it, or which container needs more fluid in it, or which connection is broken? If you really truly understand the engine, all you need to know is what's manifesting in here. Oh, I know how to fix that. Well, the reason that this knocks and pings is because these two things have lost their connection. So let me reconnect those, or let me fill this, or let me do that. And then you can fix the engine. That's really what neurotransformational coaching and the study of the holistic human is. So that as a coach, you're not restricted with only certain sounds that the car can make that you can help with. Because if you're afraid of anything outside of your capacity in the engine, because you don't understand that part of the engine, if you're afraid of it, then when you see somebody bringing their car into your shop, that fear is going to kick in. And you know what a lot of people do? Totally unconscious. is they'll turn their open sign over to where it says closed. I'm not open. I'm not open for repairs. Now, they're not doing that consciously, but energetically, they're absolutely doing that. Because they're saying, I don't trust myself with something that you might bring to me that I can't help. So I'd rather my shop be closed. I'd actually rather you keep moving along than bring your car into my garage and me have to admit to you, really, it's me admitting to me in front of you that I can't fix your car. So the study of the whole human allows you to increase your capacity for transformation. But you got to understand some of the deep work. You got to understand how we create beliefs and how we hold on to our traumas, and what does it mean to have these drivers inside? What causes the human to make decisions? What causes the human to sabotage himself or herself? What causes addictions? How do we get over addictions? What causes the thoughts in our brains? How can we slow them down? How can we transform to new thoughts? What causes the perceptions through which we see all of life, ourselves and all other people? What causes the attitudes that we have? What creates the temptations that we have? What are these things called values? What are these programs that we've been picking up all through our lives? What are the meta programs that are working at a higher level? So I'm giving you a bunch of words, and if you haven't heard these words before, it might sound super confusing. I don't want to confuse you, but I just want you to know there are a lot of ingredients inside this human brain and the connection between the head and the heart that are important, not just important, but required to understand if you want to do this work. If you don't want to do this work, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being a snorkel coach. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, unless you really want to scuba dive. Then you just have to learn. So the cool thing about all of this is everything is learnable. I said earlier on one of the other videos, every human is healable. Most humans are not willing. Every human is also able to learn how to heal traumas, how to liberate humans, how to get people to achieve goals that they never achieved before. Every person is able to, if they're willing to study. But if you're not willing to study and you just want to take the shortcut, well, then your capacity as a coach it's just going to be limited, right? And there's no other way that I can share that with you, because that's just the truth. But if you want to be able to really, truly shift and not just wrestle with human behavior, you've got to understand the machine. You got to understand the engine. Otherwise, all attempts at behavior change are futile if you don't really address the complete human. All attempts at changing behavior are futile if you don't know how to shift the ingredients of the behavior. So that's this overall picture of neurotransformational coaching, the stuff that we can do at a deeper level. Now let me explain the distinction between function and form. So when it comes to the idea of trauma or the idea of therapy or counseling or coaching, those are all forms. Therapy is a form of doing something that provides a function of what we want. So why would somebody go into therapy? People want to go into therapy to get over something, to heal something, to no longer be stuck by something, to no longer be haunted by something. In other words, there's an outcome that somebody wants, and they choose therapy as the way to provide that outcome. Therapy is the form. Liberation is the function. Happiness is the function. Performance is the function. So I want you to really understand that the form is not as important as the function. Now, there are some therapists that cannot provide the function that other therapists can provide. There are some coaches that cannot provide the function that other coaches can provide. So I want you to be more aware as the client and as the potential coach. I want you to be more aware that what really matters is the function. So does it really truly matter that somebody gets over their trauma going through the form of therapy, or do people just want to get over their trauma? The answer is people just want to get over their trauma. I've been doing this work for 15 plus years. Not once have I ever, not once had a potential client ask me if I studied therapy or if I studied counseling or if I studied coaching. Nobody has ever asked me if they could see my certification. They don't care. All they care is that I can provide an outcome. So if that's what the clients really want, if that's what we as humans really want, then your question as a potential coach is, what kind of function do you want to perform? Now, what I can tell you after doing this work for a long, long time, can coaching really heal trauma? Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times, because it's uncountable, how many times people have told me personally, people have told other people in our community, or people have told other people that are outside of our community but do somewhat similar work. I've been in therapy for 30 years and never felt the way I feel right now. I was in therapy. We heard this just the other day. I was in therapy every week for, I think it was 20 plus years. And after one phone call, I actually feel joy. Now, I am not in any way saying anything negative about therapy. Not at all. So please don't anybody take that. This is not coaching versus therapy in this like tug of war match. Like coaches are better, and then, you know, the therapies, the bad ones. It's not at all. But to answer the question, it's the scuba diving that does the healing. Now, if you scuba dive with a therapist, you can have healing. If you scuba dive with a coach, you can have healing. It's the function, not the form. That's the biggest piece here. But the reason this is an important conversation for a lot of people is because the connotation of coaching is primarily, I think for most people, is coaching is to help me achieve goals. Therapy is to help me heal my past. Now, some forms of healing your past actually don't allow you to achieve your goals, because some people can only go into the past and just live there. And it doesn't matter whether you're with a therapist or a coach or a counselor or anybody else. If all you do is study your past and just look at it and poke at it and don't really do anything to actually uproot the weeds or actually remove the anchor, well, then whatever it was that was holding you back will probably still continue to hold you back, because all we're doing is poking the problem. And a coach can do that for you, or a therapist can do that for you. Again, function versus form. So there's got to be a shared intention of whatever it is that you want to create in your future. And what we find is, if you want to create something in your future, usually there's got to be some stuff that's uprooted. There's got to be beliefs that are shifted. There's got to be conflicts that are resolved. There's got to be traumas that are healed. There's got to be emotions that are expressed. There's something that's holding us back. Otherwise, we would just go out and achieve everything that we want to achieve. I mean, think about it. Why would a human being with this thing called a human brain, which is one of the most powerful entities on the planet, why would that human brain keep itself from achieving something that it's capable of achieving and wants to achieve? Why would it not achieve that? There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a parking brake. There's got to be an anchor. There's got to be something that's holding us back from achieving something that we want and that we can achieve otherwise. So it's very, very rare that somebody wants something and we focus on a target and we don't find something in the past that needs to be uprooted first. That's the full spectrum of neurotransformational coaching, where if we bump up against the stop sign, we can take a look at what caused us to stop. Okay, let's handle this. Let's remove this. Let's go in and do some deep work. Let's go do some of the surgery. Let's get into the brain and realize what's causing the sabotage. Let's find the inspiration that will get you over that hump, rather than the motivation that never could or couldn't sustain you when you came up against another hump, right? That's the work that needs to be done for most people, we got to get into the engine. What's actually going on? So now let's dive into trauma. I looked up the definition and it says, trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And I have a big problem with that. I have a problem with the connotation of trauma. And it's because that word deeply, that's relative. What is deep to a 2-year-old versus what is deep to a 16-year-old? And I'm talking about like actual depth of water in a human body, right? A 2-year-old will walk into a foot of water, and that's really deep. And a 16-year-old could be in 5 feet of water, and it's not that deep. It's relative to the human. It's relative to the height of the body. It's relative to the wisdom of the mind. It's relative to whether I feel like I can swim or not. And if I can swim in 10 feet of water, I can swim in 10 miles of water. So deep is always relative. Deep is a judgment. And the reason I have a big problem with the way that we hold on to the idea of trauma is because we tend to think that there's a thing called trauma and then there's a thing called not trauma. So there are two buckets, right? Is this trauma or not? And my experience is that's the wrong question. Because what's deeply traumatic to one person could be nothing compared to what somebody else has experienced, but to that person, it's the deepest pain they've ever experienced. So who gets to decide what deep is? Who gets to decide whether we've crossed the line called trauma? Here's my belief, and this is a relatively new thought for me. I don't know that I've actually taught it at the level that I want to dive into it a little bit here. Instead of thinking of trauma as a yes or no, you're either in the trauma bucket or you're not in the trauma bucket. We got to understand that trauma is a spectrum. Trauma is a continuum. And our whole human experience is trauma. Our whole human experience is trauma, just at different levels of intensity. If we can start to understand the variation of trauma in terms of intensity, rather than is it trauma or is it not trauma, then we can do so much more powerful work with ourselves and with our clients. Because here's the cool thing. The human brain handles trauma very similarly if it's low intensity or high intensity. But if we think that trauma can only be treated if it's at a certain level, like if there's deep emotional abuse or something that most people would go, oh yeah, that's really traumatic experience. If that's the only kind of trauma that gets treated, well, what about the trauma of the little kid who went to 3 different schools in one school year because mom and dad kept moving around and that kid's relationship kept getting uprooted. And that meant they had to keep learning how to make new friends, but they were too shy to do it comfortably. But we go, oh, no, that's not trauma. Because you didn't, like, nobody died. I mean, you weren't abused or anything. That's not trauma. That's what we do. So we dismiss these micro traumas, and then that causes us to not handle them. And what I've also learned in my journey is a collection of micro traumas can very easily outweigh a macro trauma, especially if we don't think they're worthy of being handled. So my working definition of a trauma is really anything that's not enjoyable, anything that doesn't match our expectations of what we want is a trauma. It's a small trauma, but we go through life dealing with missed expectations every single day. And our human brain is dealing with that all the time. If we can't manage the traumatic experiences at a low intensity level, how the hell are we going to do it at the high intensity level? And if we think we have to cross this line called trauma to then go get healed or go get treated, but then we never learn how to manage the lower expectations that we have, well, then you still have a human that doesn't function. It's like if you brought your car into my shop and you had 9 things wrong with your engine and I only treated the biggest one, but not the other 8. I'm going to give your car back to you, and your biggest, most expensive, the worst problem with your engine has been fixed, but you still don't have a working car. So my experience is that if we understand that this is more of a flow, and this is about how humans operate on a day-to-day basis, then we can actually pull up so much more of the little micro anchors, of the little micro parking brakes that are pulled up on us. And my experience is those actually do more damage than the big ones. So can coaching handle trauma? Absolutely. And it's required to handle trauma. It's required to understand how this brain, how this body is holding on to not just the intellectual traumas, but the embodied traumas. And most of us are holding embodied traumas, a collection of micro traumas. For most of us, at least a few macro traumas that our body is still holding on to so much that we're terrified of going forward. We're scared of actually being visible. We're scared of repeating the patterns of the past or the mistakes of the past. And that fear, whether it's a collection of micro traumas or a few macro traumas, that fear is what the body uses to say, I can't afford it. I don't have the time. I don't want to. It's not worth it. I'm not made for that. That's for other people, not for me. Our bodies actually make decisions much deeper and much faster than our brains do. And so if we can't help make those kinds of shifts in our bodies and in our clients' bodies, then all we have is the shallow, short-sighted, short-termed, hype-driven intellectual motivation that has only changed nobody's life. Nobody's life has ever been truly changed on a diet of intellectual motivation. Nobody. So that's the real work of neurotransformation. Now, if you like this video, check out that video where I talked about how transformational coaching actually is a healing process from the inside out.
So my commitment is that work. My commitment is neurotransformation, helping people make a change in their neurology.